we're still seeing this English culture continuing, albeit perhaps not in the same spirit as before. Getting back to the immigration point, because we talked a lot about culture, and I think that's important, because actually my worry about talking about immigration is that you can talk too much about the economic side of things without touching on those points that we've already raised, this sense of cultural loss. However, economics does cut through, partly because most people now, I mean, everyday dinner table conversations always end up centered around economics. You know, when people want to talk about the prospects of government and how to judge a government, they talk about maybe they'll get the economy going and just give them a bit of time. And people know how to talk statistics and pounds and pence. So from your work on migration control, or for migration, the Centre for Migration Control, what have you seen? So what does it cost the average person? So if we think about GDP per capita, what have we seen that become? How much of our taxes are being used to pay for various different policies? What's happening to real-term wages? You've already touched on skilled workers, skilled migrant workers.
Yeah, so there's lots to say here. The first most important thing to understand when it comes to this issue is that the institutions and organizations that have been set up to monitor this kind of thing are themselves completely corrupt. So the Office for Budget Responsibility, for example, is a creation of the kind of, I think it was created in 2010. So it was just before Gordon Brown left office, I think, but I would check that because I'm going off the top of my head there. The point is, the OBR is absolutely a kind of a creature of the kind of New Labour post-1997 consensus. And it tells us that immigration, mass immigration of the type that we've seen for the last 30 or so years, is economically beneficial. But what our research has found is that the OBR massively overstate the benefits of immigration to the tune of billions of pounds. And this is not inconsequential, because the OBR and their research and their forecasting, most importantly, inform Treasury policy and inform immigration policy. So if the OBR is saying immigration is the best thing since sliced bread for the economy, then it's going to go up. And that's part of the reason that it's been so difficult to have a conversation about immigration, is because the government itself has been telling us for years that it's beneficial. And the reason they're saying that is because the people telling them that it's beneficial are lying, ultimately. But in terms of actual numbers, I mean, there's 1.5 million economically inactive, which is to say unemployed and also possibly on benefits, immigrants in this country right now, costing the taxpayer something like £20 billion per year. And again, I need not talk to you about the better ways that money could be used. I mean, as I said before, 4,000 homeless on the streets, many of them are veterans, for example. That money could be spent putting them up in accommodation and, getting them clean from drugs or alcohol or whatever else. I don't need to go into that. You can use your imagination. But this is money that is being used to pay for people who ultimately shouldn't be here, who have no business being in this country and taking from a system that they're not contributing to. So yeah, I mean, and that doesn't even scratch the surface. I mean, as I've said already, the degree to which immigrants contribute to the economy has decreased massively only in the last few years. We hear this idea, actually, that the one thing that that left-wing commentators specifically will always come back to when talking about immigration is the NHS, the holy NHS. And don't get me wrong, I support the existence of the NHS. I believe that universal healthcare is a completely appropriate thing for any self-respecting modern nation to have. And if done right, it can be extremely effective. But you can't have universal healthcare and mass immigration. You don't get to have both, because the two cancel each other out. So I'll give you an example. Only 3% of the migrants that came to Britain last year were doctors and nurses, 3%. And yet we're told that we need mass immigration because of all the doctors and nurses. And more to the point, when those doctors and nurses do come on the health and social care visa route, they are able to bring their entire families. So sure, you might be gaining one doctor, but you're also gaining 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 patients who will take from the system. So even if we are bringing in these doctors and nurses, it's still a net negative because they're allowed to bring their families. And there's so many sort of different angles here. I mean, they haven't even mentioned students, for example. Theresa May set a target of 600,000 international students in Britain per year. And Boris Johnson and Priti Patel accelerated the numbers right up towards that. And again, allowed people coming on the university visa route to bring their families. So these are people who have no business being in this country, who are being brought here purely to meet arbitrary targets so that we can say, again, competing on these various international global indexes, that we have the best universities, the most in-demand universities and all the rest of it. And there was a time where that may have been true. But because there are so many international students in this country now, our research suggests it's something in the order of 800,000. There are literally hundreds, over 200 universities that exist solely to service international students. And it's not surprising that this is the case, because not only can the government then celebrate how good our universities are and how in demand they are, but they're also a cash cow for the universities themselves, because international students pay about 3 times as much as domestic students in tuition fees. So it's unsurprising there is a financial incentive here. But what this leads to is not only a dumbing down of the universities themselves, because universities are supposed to be exclusive places. They're supposed to be taking in only the best of the best. Whereas now we have, Tony Blair's figure was 50% of people going to university. I don't actually have the figure to hand of how many young people are going to university, but I guess it's something like that. I remember when I was at school, everyone was pushed to go to university. And what that's meant is there's been a massive dilution in the value of university education. And speaking as somebody who came out of university education last year, you can see it. It's tangible. And so there's all of these when we want to talk about the kind of quantitative side of mass immigration, there's so many different angles where it is so evidently, obviously a problem. And yet the conversation is still one that's difficult to have in polite company. It shouldn't be that way. And again, I bring it back to this crippling fear that so many people have, so many well-meaning people have, of being called racist. But actually, again, bringing it back to the phenomenon that I think of myself as being a part of, I belong to a generation where for the entirety of my adult life, everything has been called racist. Milk is racist. Chairs are racist. Air conditioning is racist. And so the word has completely lost its meaning. So when I'm accused, and I've been accused of being racist many times. I remember when I was at university, I was called every name under the sun, purely for expressing what amount to dissident beliefs, beliefs that challenge the consensus of the power structure that governs us. I was called a white supremacist, Nazi, and all the rest of it. And so my response to those things now, and what I believe the response of every person who is serious about the future of Britain should be, is when you call me a racist or a xenophobe or any of these other slurs that left-wing types throw against the right to shut down conversation, I say, do you realize that you are using the language of the power structure against somebody who is dissenting against the power structure? What you've told me by using that kind of slur against me is that you belong to an outdated political paradigm that normal people do not recognize as legitimate anymore. And so you're acting, whether you know it or not, as the foot soldier of this power structure. And I think you should just own that fact rather than pretending to be some kind of rebel.